Joining me now for Locked On Gators is John Garcia, Sports Illustrated's Director of Football Recruiting, Locked On's Recruiting Insider. And we're looking into the future here. We're going to look at 2024. But first, I'd like to thank LinkedIn Jobs for being the official college football recruiting sponsor across the Locked On College Network. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. And I realize I just said that we're going to look into the future, but it's kind of the present also
Yeah.
because a lot of this 2024 recruiting is happening now. Teams are wrapping up 2023. Florida's already got a couple kids for 2024. But there's one thing that I think we have to focus on, which is kind of, I don't want to say the Achilles heel, but it was kind of something that stuck around way too long for Florida in 2023 recruiting, which was quarterback was not a thing. 2024, we know where Florida's priority is. Florida's priority right now is DJ Lagway. You see frats put up Lagway to the swamp and all that stuff. And that's the goal, obviously. But just even as a player, who is DJ Lagway? Right now, he's still so young.
Yeah, I mean, obviously just in his junior season right now, but this is kind of the breakout dual threat quarterback recruit, and I would say nationally, Brandon. There's a lot of big names at the top of 24, much like we saw at the top of 23, but a lot of those guys, one, are coming off the board right now, right? Julian Sand to Alabama on Wednesday. We just saw a couple other quarterbacks in that class come off the board. CJ Carr to Notre Dame has already gone down. So that class is accelerating. So him being the breakout, it's interesting in that regard, but physically, he's unique. I don't really think there's another top 2024 guy that's like him. I think, Walker White is a big physical player, but he doesn't have the athleticism that DJ has. I think there's other quarterbacks in that cycle that have the size, but just not the twitch that he brings as, again, kind of the premier dual threat in that 2024 cycle. So I think that he's unique, and I think that his recruitment has stretched so nationally because of that at 6'3", 6'4", 215 pounds or so. He just brings different juice, a different level to the quarterbacking position that obviously Florida covets, and a lot of these other schools are very high on there as well. So he broke out last year as a sophomore, and this year as a junior. He's been even better. I mean, the numbers are crazy when you watch him play, and he's playing in the state of Texas. So I think that is another kind of point of emphasis in looking at DJ Lagway and the ability to potentially come in and play early at the next level. The size obviously tells you that he physically can handle that SEC, Big 10, Big 12 type of atmosphere. But the progress we've seen with him, not only as a runner, but as a passer, I think has really, upped his own stock and probably the confidence that he could come in and compete right away, almost regardless of where he ends up. So that's why his recruitment has been accelerated. I think a lot of schools are kind of doubling and tripling down on Lagway, and I know we'll get into it now, but Florida's done as good a job as any program in the country relative to prioritizing him early, getting him on campus, and reciprocating and following up thereafter.
Yeah, I mean, you just mentioned it. We're going to get into it with DJ Lagway, the Florida Gators. I know that I've seen just on like Twitter recently that it's like, hey, like DJ Lagway could commit by the end of the year, like by the new year, he could have his decision made. You mentioned there's already been a few 2024 dominoes that have fallen. Florida's obviously prioritizing DJ Lagway. Just what has his recruitment been like, and what can Florida do to kind of hit the hammer on the head here with DJ Lagway?
Yeah, well, the competition's all over the place, right? We mentioned that skill set and that size that really every offense has a fit for. So because of that, yeah, I mean Texas A&M is all over him, which is obviously relevant here this week. He's been there a bunch. TCU and that offense and what they've been able to put on tape this year has piqued his interest. He's a Baylor legacy, so the in-state schools are going to have some kind of say here. LSU's been involved, obviously Florida in this conversation as well. So it's going to be interesting to see how it shakes out. I think it's good for Florida that Alabama has now hit their 24 quarterback. Georgia went into the Northeast to pick up theirs just a couple weeks ago. Ohio State got Dylan Raiola, which really kicked off, kind of the 2024 QB dominoes. We mentioned CJ Carr to Notre Dame. So I think a lot of the more outside of the region brand names have already kind of hit their marks. So I think this is going to probably be more of a Big 12 SEC type of battle for Lagway. And again, I think that's advantageous for Florida, right? The quarterback they have on the field right now, Anthony Richardson, is closest to DJ from a skill set perspective than maybe any of the other schools involved. LSU with Daniels, I think, is similar in that regard. So I think the sell from those two programs in particular is unique. And then the other schools, again, are in Texas, right? It's just, it is what it is geographically, right? Closer to home. Obviously, the personal and family ties to Baylor probably going to keep them in it. I imagine A&M stays in it, and again, LSU and I think the Florida Gators there as well. LSU was in it for Julian Sayin, who was the one who committed to Bama on Wednesday. So naturally, they pivot. Lagway will be one of those guys that is very, very high on Brian Kelly's board. So a lot of, again, what we talk about every week, right, Brandon? You're going to go win these battles. It's against these same kind of schools, including at the quarterback position. So I think he's going to be DJ Lagway. I think he's going to be kind of that thermometer recruit, right? That temperature check. Like if Florida can pull this thing off, and right now, who's to say they're not the favorite? If they can pull this thing off, the perception of the ceiling of the 2024 class totally changes, right? Because this 23 class for Florida is very good, borderline top 10 class. You've hit just about every mark, but quarterback was kind of the weak spot because it didn't happen early. Obviously, new coaching staff, all of that, and you swung and missed at some pretty big names along the way. So clearly, that's part of the opposite of the strategy with Billy Napier and company right now. Let's hit 2024. Let's hit quarterback almost first and foremost, and then build the rest of the class from there. And I think if you accomplish this, again, not only is it maybe the premier dual threat, but this is a Texas kid. You know, this totally widens that UF perception even beyond SEC country.
Yeah, and we've talked about a lot of things in terms of recruiting and the factors that go into it, whether it's NIL or coach track record, whatever it might be. I think maybe the best barometer, we'll say, is actually how these quarterbacks are playing. And I feel like that's one thing that worries me, at least with Florida, is that Anthony Richardson is clearly immensely talented, but hasn't been that superstar that people thought he would be this year. Whereas LSU, you can say, hey, Jaden Daniels might not be the most physically gifted quarterback in terms of having a great arm and being as jacked as Anthony Richardson or even DJ Lagway looks now, but we've gotten the most out of him. So imagine what we could do with you. And I feel like that's one of the things that worries me with Florida here with quarterback is they have not put out the product that they can go to. And Billy Napier has never done this in his career, where you put a quarterback out there in his offense and you go, we're going to get you to the NFL. And I feel like that's got to be the biggest thing, at least for me, that worries me with Florida, or even recruiting any quarterbacks, let alone a top guy like DJ Lagway.
Yeah, I think it's a double-edged sword, right? I mean, I think you could say, yeah, look, the track record isn't there, but then you could also say, look, it's year one. The Richardson's such a darn wild card. I mean, it could be the Utah game, the Tennessee game, or the bottom could fall out, right? With his game. So, how much of that do you put on the coaching staff? How much of that do you put on Richardson himself? I think that's an element to consider in this thing, and I think when you're talking about the sell from UF staff to DJ, it's like, hey, this is kind of the sample. This is the appetizer of what we think we can do with this type of player. But now you say with you, maybe your game is a little bit further along at the same stage compared to AR and things like that. We think we can enhance a lot of the good things that we've already, put on tape here in 2022. So there's really a sell on both sides of this thing. It's never, again, it's the games and the current display, I should say, of an offense, defense, special teams, whatever it is. It never factors as much in recruiting as much as we think. It's more about the plan. It's more about the intent. It's more about the philosophy of the offense as opposed to the tangible from this particular season, right? Because otherwise, why would Notre Dame have an elite quarterback verbally committed at this point? It really goes across the country with some of these spots. Just because it's not rolling on the field doesn't mean philosophically in terms of the investment that things aren't still on the up and up. I mean, look at what Miami's doing in recruiting. Look at what Florida's done in recruiting across the board this cycle. I think you could throw Texas in that conversation as well. These are programs that are recruiting at a top 10 clip, without a top 10 product on the field right now. And that's a part of it, right? You are creating an angle and a sell to the future to say, hey, yeah, it's not going the way we want. So let's turn that around and let's have you be a part of that turnaround as soon as possible. And those are three schools and coaching staff that have kids bought in despite the on-field product being a little bit more up and down.
This episode is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy, the easiest place to spice up college football season. It's easy to play and win cold, hard cash. And I know that this weekend, for this game specifically, the way that I will make money, Montrell Johnson rushing yards, Anthony Richardson rushing yards, and Devin Achane rushing yards, or A-Chain rushing yards for Texas A&M, because you can't pick them all from the same team. Why not pick the guy that's going up against a bad run defense, right? Why not do it? You can sign up with the promo code Locked On, and Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100. You deposit $100, you get another $100 free. Yeah, and there's one more recruit that we got to talk about today, and I feel like for at least we've talked a lot about perceptionally. It feels like perceptionally this is QB2 for Florida, at least right now, where they've put a ton of resources into DJ Lagway. Next has been Davi Belfort's been on campus multiple times. He's had visits where he's brought his family, where he's brought his QB coach, where he's brought a bunch of people. And so it seems like Florida's put investment into him. He reclassified from 2025 to 2024, and then Florida confirmed that they're still interested in him and that they're still looking for him. So who is Davi Belfort as a quarterback, and how has his recruiting kind of changed where we've seen him in 2025, now 2024?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, right? It has certainly changed and accelerated beyond the reclassification. Belfort's interesting, right? I mean, this is kind of the antithesis of DJ Lagway, right? DJ 6'4", 220, big, physical, athletic, dual threat. Davi's more of your modern quarterback in that he's small, 6 foot, agile, quick, quicker than fast. Think of the Bryce Young body type. Mentally, I don't think any quarterback is there compared to Bryce, but in terms of that skill set, I think he's got a quick trigger. He's smart. He's been around, like you said. His dad's rich, right? So he's got these resources that at that position matter, right? He'll fly across the country for a quarterback session. I've seen him working with Michael Vick and Jalen Waddle and all these big name players because they have those means. So he's getting a lot of tutelage. He's been a varsity starter since he was a freshman, and he's really blossomed this year at Gulliver Prep down in Miami, throwing to Jalen Brown, who's a big-time wide receiver recruit as well, and has helped him have kind of his best season in high school football. So there's a lot to like about kind of the intangibles with Davi Belfort, right? Mature kid, been around, well-traveled, obviously just a different type of upbringing based on the resources there, which means things are going to be more mature, more business-like, right? There's less to play around with. It's more professional. It's built in and packaged such a different way because Vitor Belfort is his dad, and this is something that both parties have committed to for a long time. So it's resulted in a lot of interest. He's a productive kid, again, quick trigger, anticipatory thrower, a guy who can move enough in the modern offensive style that his offer list is huge as well. And you wonder with that reclassification now, who stays in it, right? Do some fall off a little bit and say, well, we've got this guy on the board, this guy on the board, or do some others double down and say, hey, let's go get this guy right now. And again, as you mentioned, I mean, so well traveled. He's been everywhere, right? I think Michigan State's done a really good job in this recruitment. There was certainly some Bama buzz before saying committed to Alabama just this week. So I do think Florida's in an interesting spot here, right? They're kind of the newer school in on him since the summer months. As you said, he camped, he earned the offer in person from Napier and company, and he's been back a bunch of times. And I think he's going to come back at least one more time before the 2022 season wraps up. So depending on the timeline compared to Lagway, it's going to be interesting. If you're a Gator fan, you kind of want Lagway to not get along with it, but you want to know your fate, if you will, with him. And then see what's up with Belfort thereafter, because it could be a situation where both guys, because of these other 2024 quarterback dominoes starting to fall quicker and quicker, both guys could be a little bit closer towards making a final decision here. And again, it's not just those two. We hear about it from Walker White. Jaden Davis is one of the top uncommitted quarterbacks in 24. We hear about him accelerating the process. It's almost like a collective where everyone's like, hey, let's try to get this thing done sooner rather than later. So you wonder just how far along Lagway is relative to Belfort, and how much that could influence the Gators' chances to land at least one of these guys, because obviously that seems like the plan at this point.
Yeah, which just leads me to say it's the Florida Gators. I'm incredibly excited. I like them both. I can't wait to get neither of them. That's just how things go for us, and I'm ready to be hurt again, as I am with every
Never say
recruit.
never, man. Look, you flip Marcus Stokes in 23. Rashada stuff aside, and look, that camp's been pretty quiet lately too, right? So, you just never know how these quarterback situations are going to shake out. Last year, this time, there was quarterbacks changing their minds because of the carousel and different things. So, there's always some fluctuation with the quarterback position, but we know UF and Billy Napier, they need bodies, right? They need numbers, right? Who knows what the future is for Richardson, and beyond that, just no experience on the current roster. So you need to add some volume to that quarterback room, independent of what Richardson decides, or what Florida decides with Richardson, I should say. So I think that's the main goal there. And it just so happens that you've done a really good job recruiting the class of 24 at that position. So I get the sense that that room is going to look and feel totally different in the next 12 to 18 months.
And I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to the change. I get the feel that that entire Gators locker room might look a little bit different in a
Probably.
very, very brief time. So thank you so much, John. This is John Garcia, Sports Illustrated's Director of Football Recruiting, Locked On's Recruiting Insider. Find him all throughout the Locked On College channel and on Locked On Gators, sometimes twice a week.
Thanks for having me.